Hey everyone, welcome to the next lecture of DOM, that is DOM 3. So in today's lecture, we will see more about this DOM and how to make very simpler web pages using this DOM. So before going to that, so in first class, we saw something about input values, right? So suppose you have input tag, okay, with some placeholder, enter name, and you have another input tag type is equal to password or mobile number type is equal to number and take mobile number, right? And then we have a submit button. So whenever user clicks on the submit button, we should take both these input values and display on the browser. So how we did that? So if I write a script tag, so what is the first tag? So first we need to write an event listener to this. So how to add an event listener? So first catch the button. So document dot query selector. I will use button. Okay. Dot add event listener. So this will take two arguments. First one is the event name. So the event here is click and then function name, my function. Okay. So this is the event they will take. And I'll write function, my function. And I'll check whether my function is working fine or not. So inside function. So let us inspect and shift to bottom, console, submit. So I'm getting inside one. So cool. So now inside this function, I need to catch both these input values. So how can I catch the input values? So I'll give some ID to this, ID equal to name and also ID equal to mobile. So I'll catch this. So document dot query selector. So what is query selector here? Name. So I should mention a hashtag because it's an ID. Name dot value. So I'll keep it inside a name. So var name is equal to, and then var mobile equal to document dot query selector mobile dot value. So now if I do console log name and value, I will get name and mobile. I will get both name and mobile. Suppose if I enter name and some mobile number, I'll get in the console. Cool. So this is working fine. So I also wanted to show this on browser. So how can I show? So I will make it in a h1 tag and h2 tag. So inside the h1 tag, I will display my name, and inside the h2 tag, I will display my mobile number. So how can I display that? So select it. So document dot query selector h1 tag dot inner text equal to name, and similarly you will select h2 tag. So we saw all these things yesterday's class only. Dot inner text is equal to mobile. So now if I submit with some mobile numbers, I get on the browser. This is working fine. But there is one disadvantage or not disadvantage. So there, if the number of input tags is getting increased, suppose you have some 10 or 15 input tags, then using this method is not recommended. So for this, we have something called as forms. Okay. We have something called as forms. So whenever you visit any website or whenever you visit Masai School website while filling in the form, so you might have filled these forms, right? So it consists of name, mobile number, all those things. So now we will see how to change this code so that we can use forms. Okay, how to change this code to use that forms. So there will be some steps involved in this. So you need to follow these steps. These are not given in any documentation, but we wrote it while seeing the steps. So the first step is, so whatever input tags you have. So how many input tags you have in this case? You have two input tags, right? So you need to wrap this input tags around a form tag. So wrap input tags around form tag. So that is the first step. So I will wrap it now. So I will keep a form tag here, and I will copy this entire, cut this entire input tags and paste it inside the form tag. So now my input tags are wrapped. Wrapped means closed around a form tag. That is the first step. And now in forms, you should not use button submit. Okay. So you should not use button submit. Instead, you should use input type is equal to submit. That is the second step. So second step is use input type as submit and not button. I don't use buttons because buttons won't work with along with forms. So instead of this button, I will remove this. So you should write input type is equal to submit. That is also input, right? So you need to wrap around the form tag again. So I will take input and type is equal to submit. When you write input type is equal to submit, can you see you're getting something as submit only. I will comment this out for now because it's throwing some errors. Okay. Yeah. So input type is equal to submit also gives a button. So that is the second step. Now what is the next step? So previously, where did we had the event listener? We added the event listener to the button, right? Now my button is not there. We have changed the button to input type is equal to submit. So we can't write event listener to button. So in this case, we need to write event listener to the form itself, to the parent. What is the parent here? Form. So how can I select document.query select instead of button? I should write form. So that is the third step. So what is the third step? Add event to form tag. And when you're adding event to form tag, okay, your event name should not be click. Event name should not be click. It should be submit. Instead of click, whenever you're using forms, event name should be submit, not click. So that is the fourth step. So event name should be submit. So that is the fourth step. So you need to write event listener submit. Okay, cool. So now we are at a function. So now I'll uncomment these functions now. So now let's see what is happening in Ogu. So if I refresh and if I enter my name and some mobile number, click on submit. So what is happening in this case? Can you see it again? So I'm entering my name and submit. Okay. So what is happening? So my output is coming for a sec and then again it is disappearing. So this is happening because whenever you use forms and whenever you use submit inside forms, okay, so whenever you use submit inside a form, so whenever you submit a form, basically, whenever you submit a form, it automatically tries to send data to the backend. Okay, it automatically tries to send data to the backend. So here we don't have any backend. That's why whenever it's trying to send to the backend, our page will automatically refresh. So now if I'm entering, so see this refresh button clearly. So when I'm clicking on submit, my page is getting refreshed. So that's why whatever data I'm having previously, whenever I refresh my page, it's getting disappeared again. So we need to stop this behavior, stop this refresh behavior, or stop this default behavior. So form has some default behavior such that whenever you click on form submit, your page will refresh. So in order to stop this default behavior, so you need to use something called as event. Okay. You need to use something known as event. So every event listener will have an event object associated to it. Okay. For every event listener, you will have an event object associated to it, and you can access that inside your function. So here now I will write event dot prevent default. So now I'll try to enter my data, submit. So now the page is not getting refreshed. So we are preventing the default behavior of forms now. So now what is the last step? Add event dot prevent default. So these are the 4 steps you need to follow whenever you're using forms. First step is wrap your input tags around form. Second step is use input type as submit and not button. And third step is add event to form tag. And fourth step is event name should be submit. Okay. And the last step is you should prevent the default behavior of forms. So from now on, whenever you use forms, you should follow all these steps very carefully. If you miss any one of the step, your output, you'll not get your output. Cool. So next we'll see something known as, so previously, I'll create one more file. So in first lecture or in first introduction of HTML, we saw something like creating an H1 tag and adding 1 and H2 tag. I am adding 2, right? And we are also creating H3 tag, I am adding 3. So we are creating 3 HTML tags here, H1, H2, and H3. I'm opening the live server now. So we are getting something like this. But whenever you want to create these HTML tags dynamically or through JavaScript, so how can you do that? Okay, so there is a way of creating elements through JavaScript rather than directly writing in HTML. That will be useful whenever you're creating your input HTML tags dynamically. Dynamically in the sense, whenever you want to use a for loop or whenever you want to. So in previous class, I told that if you want to build a large layout, you're going to copy each code, same code several number of times, right? So you might have got an idea why can't we use for loop. So you can't use something called for loop in HTML. So for using for loop, we need JavaScript. And if you keep some for loop, and if you keep this H1, if you want H1 10 times, so you can keep inside a for loop and create an element of H1. So we'll see that also. But for right now, what I want to create is, so if you see these elements, okay, if you go to elements, so inside the body, you're getting H1, H2, H3, right? So now I'm removing these elements. Okay. Now your elements will be empty. Your body will be empty now. Okay. Or I will remove this entirely, not comment out. So now what are the steps you followed for creating this heading tag? So first you created a tag that is H1. So you created a tag H1, and after creating a tag, you wrote the inner text, right? So what is the inner text you wrote? I am adding 1. So now if I go to body, so you can see that I am adding 1. So ignore about this code. This code is because of your live server. So I will use copy path method only. Yeah. So you can see body and H1 tag. Cool. So now I want to create the same H1 tag using JavaScript. So we'll see how to create that. So what is the first step we saw in that? What is the first step you saw? So step 1 is creating H1 tag, right? So first we created H1 tag and we fill the inner text. So how to create an H1 tag? So you need to write a variable let head is equal to, there is something called as document dot create element. So what this create element will do? It will create an element. What is element? Basically, element is nothing but a tag. So document dot create element. What is your element name now, or what is your tag name you want to create? You want to get H1 tag, right? So keep H1. Okay. So now you have created H1 tag. Okay. So the basically you are creating this something called H1 tag here. So now what is the next step? You need to fill some inner text inside that, right? So how to fill the inner text? You know that already. So add dot inner text is equal to, what is inner text? I am adding 1. So my step 2 is, so this is my step 2. Step 2 is creating inner text. Cool. So we have created 2 steps now. So after creating these tags, so to be visible on the browser, it should be present inside the body, right? Without, I will refresh this. Without having my tag inside my body tag, I can't show it on the browser. So what is the next step? So you need to place the H1 tag inside this body. So how can I place H1 tag inside this body? Using HTML, you directly code it inside the body, but using JavaScript, you need to paste this H1 tag inside the body, or you need to append this H1 tag inside the body. Append means adding. You need to add it. So that is a third step. So step 3, add H1 tag, add or append H1 tag to body. So for appending to the body, first you need to call the body, right? So how can you call the body? So document dot query selector, I'm calling body. Okay. So my body, I call my body. So I need to append this head to my body. So now I will create dot append, and I will append to body. Sorry, I will append H1 to the body. So I'm appending H1 to the body. So I have append head here. So now if I refresh my page, can you see the output here? I'm adding one. So if you open this body now, so can you see H1 here? So you're adding H1 to the body now. Okay, you're adding it. It is like an imaginary picture. So you're adding it, but it is not visible in your HTML file, but it will be visible in your browser and elements. Okay. Suppose I want to add one more tag h2 below this. So what are the steps I need to follow? Again, create h2 tag. So I create var heading 2 equal to document dot create element. Now my element is h2 and I want to give some inner text to it. So heading 2 dot inner text is equal to, I will write I have heading 2. Okay. So now what can I do? Now only I'm appending only head. So now there is no change in the output. Now I want to append both head and heading 2, both h1 and h2. So what you should do? Append. So you can write, you can separate by comma and write so many elements you want. So I will separate by comma and I will write heading 2. So now you are appending body, appending head and heading 2 to the body. So now if I refresh my page, I will get both the things. If you open the body, you'll get both the things, h1 and h2. So in this way, you can create whatever element you want, which you saw in your HTML, like buttons, anchor tags, whatever element you saw during your HTML course. You can add all the elements and you can use all these elements. Okay, so that is the basic structure of this. So suppose if I want to create a button, so how can I create a button now? So similarly, let btn is equal to document dot create element button. Okay, so I created my element button. So now I want to give some inner text to it. So how can I do? So btn dot inner text is equal to, I'll give it as Masak. So now it is not visible on the browser because I'm not appending my button to the body. So what should I do? Heading 1, comma heading 2, comma btn. So now I will be able to see my button on my browser. So can you see that you're getting button here? So if I open body, you'll get button inside this heading body tag. So now I want to style this button a bit. I want to give some background color. I want to give some what you say color, background color, padding, so on. So previously you saw some method, right? So you saw like adding inline styles. So button dot style dot background color is equal to teal. And you also saw button dot style dot color equal to white, right? So if you give like this, so you will get all the things. So I can also remove the border, button dot style dot border equal to none. So I will get border as none. So all these properties can be applied. But if you see, you are making your code very long. So for writing 3 properties of styles, you are using 3 lines. So this is not at all recommended when you style your any tags. So there is one more method to ignore this, that is known as set attribute. Okay, there is one more method known as set attribute. So what do you mean by attribute? Attribute is some additional properties, right? So do you agree that class or ID is also an attribute? Class and ID is the common attribute, and also we have some src for image tag and href for anchor tag. So these are all attributes, right? So now what I will do is, so using this attribute, so what set attribute will do is, the syntax of set attribute is, so set attribute will take 2 arguments. First one is attribute name. So attribute name can be ID or class or anything. Okay. And attribute value. Suppose if I'm giving ID of container, so my attribute value will be container now. So I'm giving ID, attribute value of ID, and a name of container. So it is basically like taking a button, okay, and giving an ID to it. ID is equal to container. So I will show you that. So now I want to, for this button, I want to give ID of container. So how can I do that? I can't write ID in the body tag, right, because it is not visible to me. So what can I do is, so I will write btn dot set attribute. So I'm setting an attribute to the button, and the attribute is known as ID. Okay. And the value is container. So now let's see the browser. So if I refresh my page, if I open my body tag, so now can you see for this button, what is the attribute you have? For this button, what is the attribute you have? Attribute you have ID equal to container, and you're adding some inline styles here. So btn dot background color and all. So I'll remove this for now. I will comment out this so that you can see only ID. So now if you open this, can you see an ID of container to the button? So in this fashion, you can add an ID or class, anything. So if I add a class here, so now it will be class container. Okay. So now the button has class container. Now using this class, can you style it in the style tag itself directly? So now if I keep style, okay, now I'll keep dot container because it's a class. So now instead of writing all these steps here, can I write inside the style tag? Because my button has ID container, right? Here my button has a class container. So I will write background color teal and color as white and then border as 0. So now if I refresh my page, so can you see I'm getting the same output without adding any inline styles here. Okay, so writing inline styles is not recommended. So you need to add a set attribute of class or ID and then add all your styles inside the style tag. Okay. Okay, cool. So this is all for today's lecture. We'll see more examples in the live class. Thank you.